The wind howled like a living thing the night the boy realized no one was coming back for him. It wasn't the soft wind that whispers through trees or pushes clouds across a blue sky. This wind screamed. It clawed at the frozen peak, throwing needles of ice into the darkness, shaking the thin fabric of his jacket as if trying to rip it apart. Somewhere far below, the world still existed, cities, roads, warm kitchens, people laughing, but up here, on this isolated mountain peak, there was only cold, fear, and a 13-year-old boy fighting to stay alive. His name was Ethan. Just hours earlier, Ethan had been part of a small climbing group, a winter expedition meant to be challenging but safe. That's what the adults had said. They had checked the weather, studied maps, promised that everything was under control. Ethan had begged to come along, desperate to prove he wasn't a kid anymore. He wanted adventure, a story to tell, something that would make people look at him differently. He got his adventure, just not the one he imagined. It started with the storm. Mountains don't warn you politely. One moment the sky was dull and gray, the next it collapsed into chaos. Snow fell so thick it erased the horizon. The trail vanished under white sheets. Visibility dropped to a few feet, and panic crept in quietly, like a shadow stretching across the ground. The group tried to stay together, but the wind separated them, pushing bodies apart like toys. Someone shouted Ethan's name. He shouted back. The sound was swallowed instantly. Then there was nothing. Ethan stumbled, slid, and fell hard against a wall of ice. When he struggled back to his feet, the world was empty. No voices, no footprints, no sign that anyone else existed. Just endless white and the roar of the storm. He stood there, heart pounding so hard it hurt, waiting for someone to appear through the snow. No one did. At first, he convinced himself it was temporary. They'd regroup. They always did. He remembered the instructors' voices. If you get separated, stay put. So he stayed. Minutes passed. Then an hour. The cold crept into his boots, his fingers, his face. His teeth chattered uncontrollably. Fear stopped being loud and became heavy, settling deep in his chest. As daylight faded, reality hit him with brutal force. He was alone. Completely alone. On a frozen mountain peak. Night on a mountain is different from night anywhere else. Darkness doesn't just fall, it consumes. The temperature dropped sharply, and the wind grew even more violent. Ethan's hands were numb, barely responding when he tried to clench them. He forced himself to move, knowing that stopping meant freezing. He found a shallow rock overhang, barely enough to shield him from the worst of the wind. It wasn't much, but it was something. He curled into himself, pulling his knees to his chest, pressing his back against the ice-cold stone. His mind raced. He thought of his mom, how she'd hugged him that morning and told him to be careful. He thought of his dad, who'd joked that he'd come back a mountain man. The thought almost made him laugh, and then almost made him cry. Crying would waste energy. He remembered that much. The first night was pure survival. Ethan drifted in and out of shallow sleep, waking every few minutes in panic, afraid he'd stopped breathing, afraid he'd let himself go. Each time he woke, he forced his stiff limbs to move, rubbing his hands together, stomping his feet, whispering to himself just to hear a human voice. When morning finally came, it didn't bring relief. The storm had eased, but the damage was done. The landscape was unrecognizable. Snowdrifts towered where paths had once been. Ice coated everything, reflecting the pale sunlight like broken glass. Ethan stepped out from his shelter, squinting against the brightness. He searched the horizon desperately, hoping to see movement, color, anything that meant rescue. There was nothing. Hunger hit him hard that morning. He hadn't eaten since the day before, and the cold burned calories at a terrifying rate. He checked his pockets. A crushed energy bar, half a bottle of frozen water. That was it. Panic threatened to take over, but something inside him hardened. He made a decision then, one that would save his life. If he was going to die up here, it wouldn't be because he gave up. Ethan rationed the energy bar into tiny pieces, forcing himself to eat slowly despite the hunger. He tucked the rest away like it was treasure. He knocked the frozen bottle against a rock until the ice cracked, melting small amounts with his breath. Every sip felt like a victory. As the day went on, he explored cautiously, never straying too far from his shelter. He needed a better place to survive the nights. That's when he spotted it, a narrow crevice between two massive rocks, partially filled with snow. It was dangerous, but it offered protection. Using numb fingers and raw determination, he dug, scraping ice away until he could crawl inside. The space trapped heat. It was dark, cramped, and terrifying, but it was warmer. That night, the mountain tested him again. The temperature plunged well below zero. The wind screamed, trying to invade his small refuge. Ethan wrapped his arms around himself and focused on breathing, slow and steady. His thoughts wandered in strange directions. He imagined sitting on his couch at home, watching TV, complaining about homework. The memory hurt more than the cold. By the third day, his body was weakening. His movements slowed. His lips cracked and bled. Every breath felt sharp, like inhaling knives. But something else happened too. His fear changed. It didn't disappear, but it sharpened, turning into focus. Ethan began to think like a survivor, not a lost kid. He noticed patterns. The way the sun moved across the sky. Which areas melted slightly during the day. Where snow collected and where rock stayed exposed. He gathered small chunks of ice from sunlit spots, melting them more easily. He used broken pieces of rock to build a crude wind barrier near his shelter. Small improvements, but they mattered. Loneliness was the hardest enemy. Days passed with no human sound. No voices. No engines. Just wind and silence. Ethan talked to himself constantly. He told stories out loud, recited things he remembered from school, replayed conversations from his life. It kept him anchored. It reminded him that he was still a person, not just another frozen shape on the mountain. On the fifth day, hope almost killed him. He heard a noise. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. A helicopter. Ethan exploded into motion, stumbling out into the open, waving his arms, screaming with everything he had left. Tears streamed down his face as the sound grew louder. This was it. He was saved. Then the sound faded. The helicopter passed on the other side of the peak, hidden by rock and snow. It never saw him. When the noise disappeared, the silence felt heavier than ever before. Ethan collapsed to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. For a moment, he wanted to stop fighting. To lie down and sleep. Just sleep. But somewhere deep inside, a stubborn spark refused to go out. He remembered something his dad once told him: as long as you're breathing, you're not done. Ethan forced himself back into his shelter. He shook violently, from cold and from emotion, but he stayed awake. He stayed alive. The storm returned on the seventh day, fiercer than before. Snow buried the entrance to his crevice, sealing him inside darkness. Panic surged as he clawed at the snow, gasping for air. He dug frantically until light broke through again. His hands were bleeding. He didn't feel it. Food was gone now. Hunger was a constant, gnawing pain. His body began to eat itself, draining strength from his muscles. Standing became an effort. Thinking felt slow, like his brain was wrapped in ice. Still, he followed routines. Wake, move, melt ice, check the sky, survive. On the ninth day, Ethan did something that likely saved his life. Using a piece of reflective metal from his gear, he positioned it near his shelter, angling it toward the open sky. He didn't know if it would work, but he knew rescue teams looked for signals. He practiced flashing light whenever the sun appeared, even weakly. It gave him purpose. That afternoon, the sky cleared in a way it hadn't since the storm began. The world stretched out below the peak, endless and terrifyingly beautiful. Ethan stood unsteadily, raising the reflective piece, flashing again and again. His arms shook. His vision blurred. He thought he might pass out. Then he saw it. A small dark shape in the distance. Moving. Growing. The low thump of rotor blades reached his ears, faint at first, then undeniable. A helicopter. This time, it changed direction. Ethan screamed, waved, flashed the light wildly. Tears froze on his cheeks as the helicopter circled.